Welcome back to the Double Leg. I'm one half of the show, Hey Drive Picks, the other half of the show, the Parlay. Joining me in to break down some UFC 287. We're back in Miami 20 years later. We're back in Southern Florida. How are we feeling?
Good, man. Sucks it's a UFC off week, but we were blessed with 8 straight weeks of fights, so 1 week off won't hurt us, and jump right back into it with a pay-per-view.
Yeah, right. A little reset after the 8 straight weeks. I'm pretty sure we're getting 8 more weeks in a row after this little break. But for the first 8 weeks, 19-3 on the NHA plays for myself, and that's good for 86%, I believe.
It's crazy
win rate. So we're ranking those out in the premiums. If you want to get in on those, link will be down in the description. $19.99 per month, so it's less than $1 a day. Gets you everything you need to know about the UFC card for every week. If you want to wait until the plays are available Friday night or Saturday morning, $9.99 for when those come out. We'll always have those available for anybody that just wants to try it out one time. But other than that, we got a good amount of fights to go through on 287, so we won't waste any of your times. We'll have the timestamps down below, and then we'll throw the individual videos out as well. So we'll get into it, starting with the main event. The middleweight championship of the world, Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya, minus 135 for Adesanya, plus 135 for Pereira, over under 4.5 rounds, plus 110 for the over, minus 110 for the under. Always odds are courtesy of BetOpenly. Person to person, no house, only 1% juice. BetOpenly.com. I can guarantee you no other book is going to have these prices available for you. So this one is tough. I've gone back and forth. I know a lot of people have talked about it and given their take on it. It is it's crazy to see that Pereira is still the underdog, but I can see why he is still the underdog. But it's still just wild to see that he is. What do you think on this one?
Yeah, man, it's just one of those fights that we've seen him in the octagon together before. We saw him in kickboxing before that, but it's like there's still so many factors that go into trying to break down this fight and get on the right side. I mean, in the first MMA fight between the two, Izzy was winning that fight on the judges' scorecards. He just had to survive the rest of that 5th round, and he gets his hand raised. And, and he performed really well that night, besides getting clipped in that last round and losing by TKO. I mean, Izzy brought his A game for the first half of that fight. And, Pereira, he's just one of those freaks of nature with the strength and the power and even the size. I mean, you go and look at him standing next to guys like Dominic Reyes and even Glover Teixeira, who's a 205er, and he's massive compared to those guys. So it makes you wonder, like, how much longer can he really fight at 185? And it obviously gives him a huge advantage over guys, even like Izzy. I mean, that power is just unreal. Obviously, he's a credentialed kickboxer, one of the best kickboxers, especially we've seen in the UFC. So, yeah, it just comes down to I don't even know if Izzy has to switch up his game plan because he did so well in that first fight. But he's definitely going to have to be a lot more cautious of that left hand and that power, especially as the fight goes on. And I think Izzy knows that you can't coast in this game. And he should have known that better in the first fight because you could tell he was starting to try to coast to that decision victory there. And obviously it didn't work out. But skill for skill, I think Izzy's obviously the faster-handed fighter. He uses his distance really, really well. And even though he gets a lot of decision wins, but Izzy still got power. I mean, he had Pereira hurt after that first round. But as far as raw power and strength go, you got to give it to Pereira. But for me, I just think Izzy has been at this and he's been a champ for so long. He knows what he has to do from here. He knows he was beating Pereira in that first 4 rounds. And, when he did get this fight to the ground in their first fight, he had some success with the control time. And, Pereira, I'm sure, has been working on it and obviously training with Glover Teixeira. But, I mean, Izzy looked like he was a level above Pereira when it went to the ground there. So I'm not going to be surprised if you see some kind of trip during this fight. Izzy staying on top with the control, landing some decent shots, and just stealing rounds. I've got to stick with Izzy here for the pick. it's just so hard to bet against him, even after seeing him get TKO'd, considering what those first 4 rounds look like. But I don't think it would be, ridiculous to have some kind of Pereira prop on it by KO. But for the money line, for the pick, I think Izzy's the play here.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, Izzy has never been an underdog in the UFC as far as the betting lines go. He's been around even before in one fight. This one, he's still the favorite, but a very slight favorite. So, I mean, you're getting a price that you really have never gotten on Israel Adesanya. In the last fight, I was on Alex Pereira, and he came through for me. But that was like, he was like plus 180, plus 190 on BetOpenly. So that changes a lot. Because like you said, Izzy was gonna win. He was winning the fight. It kind of goes back to the Usman and Edwards thing. It's like, okay, he was winning the fight, but at the same time, he still lost, and he got not the same kind of knocked out, not clean cut, just out cold knocked out. But at the same, like, he still lost to the guy 3 times. Like, there's still some kind of mental blockage that has to go on there for Izzy, having lost to this guy 3 times. He's been knocked out by him twice now. Once was out cold, once in the octagon. That was a TKO stoppage. But there's something that's got to go on there. And Alex has kind of like leaned into it a little bit. It's basically like this guy's just out hunting Israel Adesanya. Like, he doesn't care about anybody else. He's just going to keep hunting Izzy. If Izzy wants to get back in the octagon with him, he's going to keep going after him, and he's going to keep beating him. But at the same, I'm like, dude, it's so clear, like, Izzy's the better mixed martial artist, but Alex just might have his number. Like, it just might be that fact. It might be that simple, that he just has his number. But if Izzy can just stay safe, like we were talking about, just stay safe, do exactly what you're doing, mix in some wrestling. In the first round, he had him dead to rights at the bell. And then second round, Pereira wins the second round. He comes out in the third round. He gets a takedown, and he's on his back for most of the round and wins. Like, that was the safest round that he won. He had 4 minutes of control time. Do more of that. Like, do more of that. I know it's not – it might hurt your ego a little bit to be like, I have to wrestle this guy to beat him, even though we were both kickboxers, and that's where we originally met. Might have to wrestle this guy to beat him. But it's so tough to take a guy that has lost to another guy 3 times, and you're like, no, this is the time. Like, if you take Izzy and he loses again, I'm gonna feel really stupid. But I think he's still the better mixed martial artist, and maybe there's some kind of pressure that is lifted off of his shoulders, that he's like, I have nothing to lose. If I beat him, then I'm the champion again. If I don't, like, I've already lost to him 3 times. It's not a big deal. Like, did anybody expect anything different? Izzy's he's a competitor, though, and I think he's going to come out with a solid game plan. And at that price, like, I think I got to take him. I think I got to take Izzy. He is younger than Alex Pereira too, so maybe, I mean, he's got a little bit more of a future, at least in the middleweight division. Like, who knows what Pereira does after this, win or lose? Does he stay at 185? Does he move up to 205? Does he move up to 255? We'll find out. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Izzy for the pick. I don't even know if I'm gonna play a side or not. I might play a side for fun or something, because I will be going to the event again. But I don't know. Like, it's such the unknowns. It really reminds me a lot of the Edwards Usman fight. It's like, who can implement their game plan better? If Izzy's gonna stand on the feet with him, he has to circle off the cage.
He can't. He can't get caught up against the cage.
He cannot. He was having great success with that in the first round, and even in the fourth round. Like, Izzy had a solid fourth round as well. When they were both on the feet, he's just, if Alex would close the distance, he's just circle out and then put his back up against the center of the octagon, so he has all this space to move out of the way, so Alex can't cut him off with that left hook. He has to do it. He has to do it. And like you said, you can't coast at any time, any point in time. If you're Pereira, you have to close that distance. And honestly, I think you gotta be aggressive the entire fight. Like you can't wait until that 5th round and expect something to happen, like we just saw a week ago with Cheeto and Corey. Like you can't just wait for that opening. You got to make that opening. So that's all I got on that one. If you want to say anything else.
I don't think that Alex Pereira can beat Izzy by decision. I don't think he can.
Yeah.
I think if it goes all 5 rounds and nobody's getting knocked out, I think Izzy, with the style points and the volume, I think he beats him like 8 or 9, 10 times out of 10. But it's just that left hook and that power you got to watch out for. And Pereira is so accurate with it sometimes that when it lands, man, he's going to put you out. So, yeah, man, that's what makes it so tough, is because we know Izzy should be the better mixed martial artist. And over the duration of 5 rounds, he's going to win most of that, or most of the rounds. But it's just that power, which makes it fun too. So, but yeah, I'm going to stick with Izzy. I think, being such a good champion for that many years and having this much high level experience now, he knows what he needs to fix. He knows what he needs to do. And I think he's going to stick to a really good game plan. But both guys are going to have to be at the top of their game if they want to get their hand raised at 287. So what a main event, though. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. One last thing to go off your point, like Izzy, you can't really beat Izzy by decision. Like you just can't do it. He's so good defensively at getting out of range and getting out of your shots. Like you just can't hit him enough to win enough rounds in a 5-round fight. Like even though Pereira outstruck him in the total numbers, like Izzy still had 3 rounds under his belt. Like he was gonna win that by decision. So it's a tough road, I think, for Alex Pereira. He's got to knock him out, and I think that's what we both conclude. Welterweight bout, Gilbert Burns minus 450. Jorge Masvidal plus 450 as well. This is going to be his 52nd career fight for George Masvidal. Over under 2.5 rounds, plus 110 for the over, minus 110 for the under. Gilbert Burns coming off the round 1 submission over Neil Magny, getting the spot here against George Masvidal in Miami. So Masvidal says he's the king of Miami. Let's see if he can prove it. You like the dog at all on this one? Because I know a lot of people are going to be like, it's Burns 100%. But that price, like we're talking bets here. We're talking bets. And don't get us confused. If we say the value's on one side or not, we could say the value's on the Masvidal side, but we could say, he's probably going to lose. Personally, I like Burns in this one. I'm not crazy about the price, but I'm such a non-believer in Masvidal that I might be able to play it myself, at least in a parlay or something like that. But what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think the line is way off. Gilbert Burns, at -4, over -400 is insane to me, just because like when you dive into the stats and you look at who these guys have fought, they're obviously 2 of the upper echelon fighters. Jorge Masvidal, I mean, his wins, like Darren Till, who's right now not in the UFC and hit a really rough stretch. Ben Askren, same thing, man. He was really good in one, but if you can't get the takedowns, or if you get knocked out in 0.5 seconds, it doesn't really matter. And he kind of struggled in the UFC too. So man, he's kind of missing that big marquee win over a guy like Colby Covington or even Gilbert or somebody like that. But if you dive into the stats, Gilbert Burns is a great, grappler, and on the ground he's phenomenal with the submissions. But getting it to the ground, he's not like the most potent wrestler by any means. I mean, he's only got like a 36% takedown accuracy, or 35% takedown accuracy. While Jorge Masvidal, over 17 UFC fights, has held up a 74% takedown defense, and that is against guys like Kamaru Usman in the 2 fights they had, and Colby Covington. So I mean, Jorge's no slouch in the defensive wrestling department, and he averages over 1.4 takedowns himself per fight. So if he can keep it on the feet, man, I just think this fight gets a lot closer than the odds are laying on. And if it does go to the ground and Gilbert's, got his back, it's a whole different story. But getting the fight to the ground for Gilbert's going to be a lot more challenging than I think people realize. And then on the feet, like, I still think Gilbert probably wins the better of the exchanges, but Masvidal is so experienced and pretty good striker too, that he could make it interesting. Gilbert's, more of that aggression, come forward, like, blitz you with these big power shots and try to hurt you. And Masvidal will sit back and counter you and do some really good work to the body with the kicks. And I mean, we've seen him have some big knockouts in the UFC too. So he is dangerous on the feet, which is where he's going to want this fight. And I think that takedown defense holds up for a little bit too. So I think as the fight goes on, I could see both these guys, wasting a lot of energy in the first couple of rounds trying to hurt each other. And somebody's going to get tired, or they both get tired. And we'll see who's got a little bit more left in the gas tank as the fight goes on. I do think Gilbert probably pulls this one out. But I wouldn't touch it on the money line. I just don't like these odds at all. Gilbert's the pick, but I'm not going to be surprised if we see a crazy, crazy fight here.
Yeah, this one, it could be a real shock. I think it could be. Because like you said, if Burns can't get the takedowns, like, it's a lot closer of a fight than the lines entail. And after losing to Colby Covington for Masvidal, like, he's been off for over a year. So it sounds like he's just been drilling the wrestling. Like, he got wrestle fucked by Colby Covington, by Kamaru Usman. He's like, all right, I need to step this up even more, because I mean, you said the stats before, and that's after fighting two of the best wrestlers in the welterweight division. And then he's going to go and work on it even more for a full year. And Gilbert Burns isn't the type of wrestler of those guys. He's a much better grappler once you get it to the ground. But getting it to the ground might be a lot tougher than we expect. But at the same time, the momentum for George Masvidal is just not good. Like, it's just really not good. His last win over an active UFC fighter right now was in 2013 against Michael Chiesa. So it's been almost exactly 10 years since he's beaten an active UFC fighter. That is pretty nuts. Like,
yep.
That's pretty fucking wild. It's honestly crazy to me how he's still up in the ranks and like getting these fights. But that's has nothing to do with the breakdown of the fight. That's just my opinion on Jorge Masvidal. He's a great marketer and everything. It's just so hard to buy into him because he really hasn't shown much to like get behind. But at the price, I say that because people always talk about his skills. Like, he has good skills, I think. Like, you think he has good skills, but like, does he really have good skills? Because he hasn't really won with those skills against like high caliber opponents. Like, he's getting the fights against high caliber opponents. He may be losing, not like he's not getting knocked out clean unless it's Kamaru Usman. He's not getting like obliterated, but at the same time, he's not winning these fights. So it's like, how can I get behind that? Gilbert Burns went toe to toe with Khamzat Chimaev. Like, and Gilbert Burns was a big underdog in that fight too. So I mean, everybody was counting him out. He went toe to toe with him, and a lot of people say that he won that fight. So a lot of people say if it went 5 rounds, he would have won. He's got a little bit of momentum coming in here against Neil Magny with the first round sub. If he can get it to the ground, like, it might be game over, because I think Gilbert is going to want to put out a statement. He's been calling out these guys that haven't really been fighting too much or that have been talking a lot, and I think he wants to prove something here. Also a resident of Florida, so maybe he's got a little bit of something to fight for there. But I'm going to go with Gilbert. I don't love the money line, but you're probably, I don't know. I mean, Gilbert by decision, Gilbert by sub. I don't think he knocks him out, but it's probably going to be Gilbert by decision. I could see that for the most likely.
Yeah, and the last thing I keep hearing is, Masvidal's old and washed up. He's old, but man, you look at their ages, and Gilbert Burns only 2 years behind him. Gilbert's 36, Jorge's 38. There's not a big age gap there. And Jorge's got 50 pro fights. He's got a lot more wear and tear on the body, but age-wise, man, they're pretty close. It's kind of shocking. Gilbert Burns doesn't strike me as a 36-year-old when you watch him fight, or you watch him come up from the UFC. So Interesting stuff, though. Should be a banger. Both guys are going to want to hurt each other.
Yeah, he looks much younger than
He does.
36. Rob Font and Adrian Yanez in the bantamweight division, minus 168 for Yanez, plus 168 for Rob Font. Over under 2.5 rounds, minus 124 for the over, plus 124 for the under. A big win streak for Adrian Yanez. Rob Font dropping his last two to Chito Vera and Jose Aldo. He's taken not quite, or he's been a little over a year off for Rob Font. He took a beating in that fight, though. I mean, you watch that back, like, whew, you look at his face, he got touched up. Even though he outstruck him. Like, that's the crazy part about Rob Font, man. He can put an insane volume on him, but he could still lose. Like, he put 271 significant strikes on Chito Vera and still lost. He got knocked down 3 times. 149 against Jose Aldo, got knocked down twice, lost that fight. And he did have the 5-round decision win against Cody Garbrandt, 176 significant strikes in that one, didn't get knocked down. So that's his last win. It was a pretty good performance, but it doesn't age the best with Cody Garbrandt. Because even at that point, like, he was not what he was, years prior. So I like the younger fighters in general. Rob Font, 35. Adrian Yanez got a lot more momentum. I think he's got a little bit more finishing ability under his belt as well. He's never lost in the UFC, so he's 5-0 in the UFC. Knocked out the Contender Series guy in 39 seconds. He knocked out Tony Kelly in less than 4 minutes in his last fight out back in June of 2022. I just think there's a lot more upside when you're taking Adrian Yanez. The only thing that scares me is if Rob Font comes out, and he's been fighting in 5-rounders the past 3 times, and he always comes out hot. He always puts out a ton of volume early. The only thing that could scare me is if, he puts out a shit ton of volume in those first 2 rounds, and then Yanez is going to have to find a finish in the 3rd round. But I think Yanez will probably be ready for that. And I think he gets it done. I think he could knock him out. Rob Font is fairly durable as far as like getting knocked out goes. He's never been knocked out, but he wears a lot of damage, and maybe this could be the time that it really kicks in. I'll take Yanez for the pick. I honestly don't mind the price because Yanez has been a pretty pricey play for the most part, and he's on a 5-fight win streak. So it's not terrible. It's not terrible. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Rob Font being almost 36. And the thing that kind of sucks about Rob Font's career is that he's got a ton of wins in the UFC, but he could never really string together that win streak to advance him up towards the top, in his athletic prime. That the win streak he did finally go on. He beat Sergio Pettis, Ricky Simon, Marlon Moraes, and then Cody Garbrandt. But it's like once he got to the top against Jose Aldo and Chito Vera, it's like maybe his time was just slightly past him. So he could never really do anything once he got to the top of the division. And now you got to fight Adrian Yanez, who's young, hungry, and reminds me a lot of Chito in ways. He's patient, he's composed, and he hits extremely hard, and he's extremely accurate. I mean, the guy's as accurate as they come. And, you mix that in with being, with wanting to be a UFC champion or wanting to be, at the top of this division, that's scary for Rob Font. Rob Font's kind of done it all in the division. He's got a ton of fights. He's fought the who's who in his last few with Chito and Jose. And Adrian's going to get a little taste of that here. And I just think Adrian shines, man. He's one of those fighters that the UFC loves. I mean, he puts on a show every time he comes out. He hits hard. He gets knockouts. I don't think the UFC would have thrown him to Rob Font if they didn't think he was ready and was going to be able to take Rob out here. Because, I mean, they got a lot of money to be made with Adrian Yanez coming up. And I think he is ready for Font. I think Adrian Yanez is as focused as they come. Just a straight killer, man. And we were talking before this, Rob Font's really technical, and he's got a good jab, but he's almost too technical sometimes where he doesn't really take any crazy chances or anything. He has a lot of decision wins on his record. Couldn't finish Cody Garbrandt when Cody was getting finished by everybody. And I just think Yanez is a tough kid too. So yeah, man, I'm actually really loving that Adrian Yanez is under a 2-1 favorite here because you never see him at that price, like you said. Adrian Yanez is going to be the pick. I'm probably going to lay something on him too. I just love his style. I'm a big fan of him. And I think this is a perfect little stepping stone to kind of cement your name in that top of the bantamweight division.
Yeah, last thing, we talk about Rob Font putting a pace and voluming up. Adrian Yanez actually lands more strikes per minute, slightly. He does get hit a little bit more, but Rob, he's a really good counterpuncher, and I think if Rob Font is going to go and start the exchanges with the jab and try to get in close, I think Yanez could find something and probably land a knockdown or two if that is the case. Welterweight bout, Kevin Holland minus 258. Santiago Ponzinibbio plus 258. Over under 2.5 rounds, minus 119 for the over, plus 119 for the under. I made a pact after the Kevin Holland last fight that said I would never bet on him ever again as the favorite, and I'm not doing it here. Could he win? Yes. Will he win? We'll see. But I'm not betting him as a favorite. That's just my rule. What do you think about this fight?
No, I'm with you 100%. I don't think Kevin Holland should be this big of a favorite against anybody after what we've seen. I know, like we've seen him against Hamzat, and obviously he's going to lose that one because of the grappling and powerful wrestling. But I mean, against Wonderboy is obviously one of the best strikers we've ever seen in the UFC. But he got 40-year-old Wonderboy, and he struggled hard in that fight, especially defensively. I mean, Wonderboy was able to do whatever he wanted during that fight. I know Holland hurt his hand in that fight. Maybe couldn't throw all he wanted at Wonderboy, but man, defensively, Holland looked like he had never seen a punch before, and he was getting hit with everything. So that scares me a little bit against Ponzinibbio because Ponzinibbio will hit you. He will find the chin. I mean, he's not a terrible fighter. That's the thing. Like Kevin Holland that had one good year where he was like, he won 5 fights in 1 year, had 5 fights in 1 year, won them all, looked like he was going to be the next big star on the rise. And these grapplers just started having their way with him. He is super long though, which scares me against a guy like Ponzinibbio because Ponzinibbio's gets touched up at times too. And Kevin throws, pretty damn hard with that right hand, and he can connect from a distance. But if Ponzinibbio gets inside and makes this thing dirty, I think he could wear on Kevin. Kevin's been hurt too in fights. Like we've seen him get cracked as well. So super interesting one for the pick. Like Holland should win this, and especially like he's kind of got some, I don't want to say underrated jiu-jitsu because it's not like the greatest, but he can submit you off of his back. He's long, those long limbs. He can catch you in triangles, Darce chokes. We've seen it in the UFC before with him. But I think both guys, especially Holland, are going to want this thing on the feet. Holland's kind of just one of those guys, like he wants to please the crowd as well. He wants to find that big finish, have fun in there. He's going to be talking and smiling. I could see it come back to bite him a little bit here, honestly. I mean, Santiago Ponzinibbio is tough, and he does hit hard when he gets in close. I just don't have the guts to bet Kevin Holland here after what we've seen, and kind of that fight IQ kind of goes out the window sometimes. So, man, for the pick, I think Kevin should get it done, but I'm not super confident in it.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I love Kevin Holland. I love watching him fight. He's a great entertainer and a great personality, but at the end of the day, like you just kind of touched on, he had chances. He has all the skills. He had chances to use all the skills with the grappling against Stephen Thompson to get a win, and he just decides not to. So he can do that if he wants to, but if he's going to be a favorite, especially as a minus 258 favorite, a pretty heavy favorite against a guy that's, been at the top of the welterweight division, at least, near the top 15, around the top 15 for a while, very experienced. I can't bet it. I just can't bet it, considering this guy has proven that he's not willing, or he's not always willing to use all the skills he has. He's just going to put on a show for the fans. In that case, I'm going to want the dog. Not saying I'm going to play it or that I necessarily like it, because I do think of it as a standing affair. Kevin Holland probably gets the better of the exchanges. Like Ponzi has great power, but at the end of the day, he's going to be much smaller. I mean, he's got an 8-inch reach disadvantage against Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland is faster. He's longer. I think he's got a little bit more snap on his shots. Ponzi kind of got saved in that third round with that knockout in his last fight against Morono.
Yeah.
He's been knocked out 3 times before. He got cracked a couple times against Morono. So Kevin Holland probably wins. But at the same time, is he just going to put on a show for the fans? Does he really care if he wins or loses? Is his hand okay? That's another thing. Like, is his hand fully prepared, to go? Because
wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, I mean, it was 4 months ago.
Yeah,
it would probably be about 4 months ago since his hand was broken. I think he had a couple screws put in there or something. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, there's a lot that keeps me away from that price on Kevin Holland at this point. But at the end of the day, I think he wins. I'm not laying the price. I'm not laying the price whatsoever. Honestly, maybe the under could be some kind of play. Because plus 119 for the under. I think Ponzinibbio could get finished. I think Kevin Holland, he's got that, he's got a really good chin. He's never been officially knocked out because his only knockout on his record is the broken hand against Stephen Thompson. So he's got a good chin.
Or that headbutt when he got
the no contest.
Yeah, against Kyle Dawkins, wasn't it?
Dawkins, yeah. I don't know. I don't know if you're Kevin Holland, if you like Kevin Holland, I'd probably take him inside the distance. It's just the price better.
Yeah, and the one thing that sticks out to me too is when I'm looking at Kevin Holland's record, his wins, his last 4 wins. Tim Means, okay, older guy, you should beat Tim Means. Alex Oliveira retired. Jacare Souza retired. Charlie Ontiveros, everybody's beaten Charlie Ontiveros. So, I mean, it's like, are his wins really that impressive? I know he's finished a lot by sub and KO. But, I mean, the guys he's beating, are they really that impressive lately?
Yeah.
It's just tough. It's tough to gauge at this point where Santiago Ponzinibbio falls because he is 36 or 37. So he is kind of older, like Alex Oliveira and Tim Means and Jacare. So Kevin Holland should beat him, but at the same time, it's a risky one if you're betting on the side of Holland.
Agreed. A couple of young prospects here. Bantamweight bout between Raul Rosas Jr. and that should say Christian Rodriguez, but yeah, that's Christian Rodriguez plus 212 for Christian Rodriguez, minus 212 for Raul Rosas Jr. Over under 2.5 rounds, plus 100 for the over, plus 100 for the under as well. Undefeated Raul Rosas Jr., 18 years old, getting a much better fighter, I think, here than his last time out against Jake Perrin. I think that Christian Rodriguez has got a lot of potential in the UFC. So kind of a couple of young guys going at it. What do you like?
Yeah, like we kind of talked about earlier, it's like if you're the UFC, I feel like you have a lot more potential with Christian Rodriguez than to give him Raul Rosas Jr. right now. Like, why put these guys up against each other when you have like somewhat star potential in Rodriguez and obviously big star potential in Rosas Jr. So it's interesting that they did that. I do think that at the end of the day, Rosas Jr.'s wrestling and grappling is probably going to be too much for Rodriguez. We saw in Rodriguez's first UFC fight against Jonathan Pierce, which is a terrible draw. I mean, that's a nightmare matchup to draw in your first UFC fight. Even though he took it on short notice, it was kind of his entry into the UFC. I think the fight with Rosas here could look a lot similar to that one. I mean, we know Rosas' game plan is going to be come forward, try to get a takedown, try to take the back, grapple until you find a submission or you just completely dominate the fight. And we saw Jonathan Pierce do that exact same thing to Christian Rodriguez. However, Rodriguez is dangerous to catch, a guillotine. He's a strong kid. Some kind of submission like that where Rosas would leave his neck open, or on the feet catch him with something coming in. I mean, he caught Jonathan Pierce with an elbow at the end of their fight that made it really interesting there. It would have probably wobbled and hurt other guys a lot worse than it did Jonathan Pierce. But I just don't see Rosas Jr. losing anytime soon. Like with that grappling pedigree, you're going to win a lot of fights at this level, especially Rodriguez. I just don't know. We know he's going to want this fight on the feet, obviously, but I just don't know if he's the guy that comes in here and puts a stop to this 18-year-old kid who's kind of going on a tear or wants to go on a tear. And for Rosas Jr., man, for being 18 years old, the kid is incredibly composed. I mean, he with Mondo Gutierrez in that fight on the Contender Series, there was a little adversity there when he realized, okay, I might not be able to get the submission. I've done everything I can. I've taken the back. I've gotten him into triangles, and I can't get this guy out of here. But he never panicked. He never gassed. He just stayed on him and just dominated that whole fight. So yeah, I think it looks a lot like that fight. If I'm being honest, I don't know if he's got such a grappling advantage over Rodriguez that he's going to go out there and just steamroll him, get a quick submission. I think this could be kind of a dogfight in a sense that Raul Rosas Jr. is just going to be all over and maybe looking for submissions, but I think it's just going to be a lot closer than people think in terms of, Rodriguez is going to be stuffing a couple takedowns here. Maybe he's just defensive the whole fight, and Raul Rosas Jr. is just offensively chain wrestling and looking for subs. But I just don't know if I see a finish here, honestly. I do think Rosas Jr. wins this fight, probably 30-27, maybe 29-28. But I think it'll be somewhat of a dogfight at times too.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of waiting for like Raul Rosas to show some kind of like age, like okay, maybe this was a little bit too much for him, but I mean, he's only been a pro for like a year and a couple months, so he's 6-0 in the past year. He's had 6 fights in the past year. He's 6-0 and 7-0 in his pro career. So he's just taking fights and he's just beating guys like easily. I think this guy's the truth. Like, impressive fight on the Contender Series, won by decision, was in control of the fight the entire time. Goes out in his debut on the featured prelim, so he's right before the main card. Like, most people are in the arena to watch this guy, and he subs Jay Perrin in the first round. So I think you can be confident in this 18-year-old. Like, as crazy as that is to say, I think you can be confident in him. I think he has all the tools to beat Chris Rodriguez. Chris Rodriguez is going to be good in the UFC, but I don't think he wins this fight. I just think Raul Rosas is going to come with a good game plan. He never fights like crazy. He's never like wild. He always seems very composed, and he just finds his way onto your back. He finds his way into positions that are dominant for him, and he's able to transition if you get out of him. So I look at the fight for Christian Rodriguez against Jonathan Pierce. Like, Jonathan Pierce put himself in some really dangerous positions. Like, Christian Rodriguez could have finished that fight a couple times. That was at 145. This is a 135 fight. So I just don't think Rosas will put himself in bad positions like that. Like, Jonathan Pierce is more of a wrestler. He's not really the jiu-jitsu grappler type that Raul Rosas is. Rosas is going to be a little bit more technical in it, a little bit more, slow pace with it, not like shooting last doubles with like Jonathan Pierce and leaving his neck out there right by the hips where you can throw a guillotine in. I think Rosas is just either coasts to a decision or he finds a sub. Like, I just don't see how Rodriguez wins this one. I don't see Rosas putting himself in a bad spot where he can get caught. He's just been around it. He's been doing it for a long time, and he's trains with a lot of the best guys. Rodriguez, it didn't look – he scared me a little bit in that fight against Josh Weems, because Josh Weems is really nothing to write home about. And he got taken down twice by Josh Weems, taken down 6 times by Jonathan Pierce, and taken down twice by Reyes Cortez, who he fought on the Contender Series. So, I mean, he can get taken down, and if he gets taken down by Raul Rosas, he's going to find dominant positions on the ground. He's going to get it. I think he does sub him. I really do. I think he gets a sub.
The one thing too with Raul Rosas Jr. that should make you a little more confident in him is that we know the lights aren't too bright for him. This isn't too big of a stage for him. I mean, he was the he was the marquee fighter on this season of Dana White's Contender Series outside of Bo Nickel. I mean, after Bo Nickel fought, everybody was waiting for Raul Rosas Jr., the 17-year-old kid who had to have permission from his parents to come in and fight. I mean, everybody was tuned in to watch and see what he had. And in the next fight, like you said, everybody showed up to watch him fight in his first UFC debut. And he did, he passed it A+ flying colors easily. Got on the mic. He's good on the mic too. I mean, he's kind of, he's got somewhat of a personality too. So he's a confident kid. And I don't think being, on the pay-per-view main card is going to affect him in any way, shape, or form. I think he's built for this. I really do. So yeah, if you are looking for reasons to be confident in Raul Rosas Jr., there's one right there.
Yeah, and to go off of that, like Christian Rodriguez could definitely be affected by that. Like this guy,
for sure.
He's only had 2 fights in the UFC, and they've both been in the Apex. And if you saw what happened to Jay Perrin in that fight, like he hasn't really been on live events in the UFC before. Like he's an Apex fighter as well. And then they stick him in there. His job's kind of on the line. And he just folded. Like he just completely folded. Rodriguez coming in here, his 3rd UFC fight. He's only 26. You're going against a guy that has so much hype around him. Could definitely crumble on a pay-per-view card in Miami. So, yeah, something to definitely keep in mind there. Kelvin Gastelum, Chris Curtis, plus 115 for Chris Curtis, minus 115 for Kelvin Gastelum. Middleweight bout here. Going to be the 40th fight for Chris Curtis. Over under 2.5 rounds. Over is minus 197. Under is plus 197. The Action Man. I got to say, the Action Man has been one of my favorite fighters to watch since he's been in the UFC. Because, I mean, he's just all action. He fights a lot. And he's fun to watch. So, I mean, he came in the UFC in November of 2021. And he's had 5 fights. So he's a 5-fight vet in the UFC. Kelvin Gastelum's last fight in the octagon was August of 2021. So since the last time Kelvin Gastelum stepped in an octagon, Chris Curtis has had 5 fights, and he's won 4 of them. So the momentum is definitely with Chris Curtis. Kelvin Gastelum is he's only won 1 fight since 2018. But I mean, he's been fighting the best of the best. Jared Cannonier, Robert Whittaker, his win against Ian Heinisch, and then losses to Hermanson, Till, and Adesanya. Chris Curtis, though, he's fighting some solid opponents in the middleweight division, and he's coming through as the underdog, and he's a slight underdog in this one as well. So it's really hard to lay off of him, I gotta say. But I don't even like to say like the experiences with Kelvin, like maybe the championship experiences with Kelvin, but Chris Curtis, this is gonna be his 40th fight. Like he's got the experience too. Like I think I can't. How could I go against Chris Curtis? Like I just can't. Even at the dog, he's good. They're gonna put him at a dog again. I have to take him. I think if this is gonna be a stand-up fair, I think he gets the better of the exchanges. The only thing that scares me is he gets hit quite a bit, but he carries that high guard all the time. Like he's not getting hit clean, but the numbers can start to pile up on him. He gets hit 6.39 strikes absorbed per minute. Kelvin, not like a massive power puncher, could mix in the wrestling, but Chris Curtis got 100% takedown defense, man. Like he's great at stuffing takedowns because he's not really an overthrower. He's just really crisp with the stand up. He's got a strong base under him whenever he throws. So I think he gets this one done. I can't really buy into Kelvin Gastelum either. I think the price is just like, what he once was. And even though he's only 31, I don't see him getting it done here against Chris Curtis, who is older, but at the same time, he's got a lot of momentum. And this is kind of a step up for him. He's getting a fight, a notable name in Kelvin Gastelum. So I'll take Chris Curtis.
Is Kelvin Gastelum the oldest 31-year-old you've ever seen in your life, dude?
Yes.
I was almost taken back when I was watching his fight, and just a couple of years ago, and they're like 29-year-old Kelvin. I'm like, no way, there's no way. And he just seems old. I don't know if it's because he's been around forever now or what the deal is, but Yeah, only 31. But here's my knock on Kelvin Gastelum is, first of all, being 1-4 or 1-5 in his last 6 fights. He just screams like, I don't even want to be disrespectful by saying lazy, but I mean, the guy's 5'9" and he's never tried to cut down to a smaller weight class at all, where he could have found success. I think Kelvin Gastelum could have been a damn good 170 fighter. But I mean, being 5'9" at 185 is tough. And I think that's why we've seen him kind of get picked apart in some of these fights. He did have some success against Cannonier. Like, he hurt him a few times and landed some good shots. But if you're a guy like Chris Curtis and you're only 5'10" yourself, you might struggle with those taller guys at 185. I mean, Jack Hermanson, perfect example, a longer guy who stayed on the outside and just kind of touched him for 3 rounds and got the win. But he's fighting a 5'9" Kelvin Gastelum. That should play into Chris Curtis's advantage here, big time, in my opinion. And Chris Curtis has some sneaky power, man. I mean, out of his 5 wins in the UFC, 4 have come by knockout. He's knocked out Joaquin Buckley, Brendan Allen, Phil Hawes, and Sean Lally. Is it Lally? I believe that was Dana White's Contender Series. But either way, I mean, he's got sneaky power, in my opinion. And then if Kelvin, for some reason, wanted to try to go out there and wrestle Chris Curtis stuffed like 22 takedowns against Rodolfo Vieira and was still had enough energy to throw punches and land some shots at the end of that fight. So, I mean, 100% takedown defense in the UFC through 6 fights is pretty damn good. And so I don't think that's an option for Kelvin here. I think he's going to have to stand and trade with Chris Curtis. And I think Chris Curtis is too technical. He's accurate. He does get hit a lot. And Kelvin, at times will land that big left hand, but I don't think it's anything that's going to put Chris Curtis out. I think he's tough. Kelvin's obviously tougher than hell. Izzy couldn't finish him after having him hurt like 500 times in that fight. We saw Cannonier have him hurt. He just doesn't go away. That's the thing. Like, Kelvin Gastelum just does not go away. But even though Chris Curtis feels like the younger fighter here, and he's not. I just don't see a world where Kelvin Gastelum goes in there and outboxes Chris Curtis on that night. I think Chris Curtis gets this win too.
Yeah, the action man. Keep her going. Michelle Waterson, Luana Pinheiro in the strawweight division, -158 for Pinheiro, +158 for Michelle Waterson-Gomez. Over under 2.5 rounds, -325 for the over, +325 for the under. You're going with the karate hottie in this one. She's what, 37 now? Hasn't had a lot of success as of recently. She's 1-4 in her last 5. Her last win was against Angela Hill, split decision. She is fighting the best of the best, though, in the strawweight division. I mean, the losses to Amanda Lemos, Marina Rodriguez, Carla Esparza, and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. So can't really knock her too much for that. That's nobody that Luana Pinheiro has ever seen. But watching Pinheiro on film and in her previous fights, like, she has some pretty solid hands on the feet. And when she goes, like when she blitzes and really wants to throw and gets inside, she's got a lot of power as well. Like, she can put the lights out. She's got 2 TKOs in the first round and she's had a knockdown on the Dana White Contender Series when she got the first round KO. And then she had a knockdown in her last fight against Sam Hughes. And her debut, she won via DQ, which was a Ronda Marcos kick to the head when she was on top of her. She's trying to get her off her. But Pinheiro also has those nasty, nasty judo throws. Like, I was watching him today. She threw Ronda Marcos like she was just a rag doll. She grabs that head and just throws you all the way over. 5 takedowns in the first round against Ronda Marcos, 2 against Sam Hughes. I think she probably gets it done here. I think Luana has the momentum. She's 29 years old. I think this could be maybe a spot where they give another aesthetically looking female fighter a spot against a previous well-known aesthetically looking fighter. And it's maybe a passing of the torch on a pay-per-view card, but it's in the prelims there. So I think she probably gets it done against Michelle Waterson-Gomez. Because what does she have to fight for at this point?
Yeah.
But at the same time, maybe she just pulls something off. I'm confident in Luana Pinheiro, though. I think she's got the skills, and as long as she doesn't go out there and blow her load in the first round, and then kind of peter off towards the end, because that's when she's most dangerous in that first round. She's got all the explosive energy inside of her. I think she wins this fight. So, what do you think?
Yeah, the one thing that does scare me is all that experience that Michelle Waterson has. I mean, she's fought everybody, it seems like, in the division. And yeah, she's kind of struggling to find wins right now. But I mean, she wasn't doing bad against Lemos until she got, choked out in that fight. She actually found a little bit of success early on, in my opinion. And, with Luana, she is so new to this level of fighting. I mean, she had the Contender Series knockout, and then the DQ, obviously, to Marcos, and the decision win over Sam Hughes, who's on this card too. And Sam Hughes is not, something to brag about by any means. But at the age that Michelle Waterson's at, I feel like we see this all the time in fighting. She's got to be getting towards the end with her age, with the record she's kind of produced in the last couple of years. You can tell that those best years of Michelle Waterson are definitely behind. I mean, 2008 through 16, she was on a win streak. She only fought 4 times in that. A few losses and a three fight win streak back in 2019. And then it's just like all downhill from there, losing to Joanna, Carla Esparza, beat Angela Hill by split decision. But Angela Hill has, some of the most losses of any female in that division too. And then loses to Madrina Rodriguez and Lemos. But it's too many unknowns for me to be confident on one side here. I mean, Luana, like I said, she's new, hasn't really fought anybody yet in the UFC. And I feel like the UFC here in this matchup's kind of given her that this is like the test the waters fight to see if she's ready or not. Even though Michelle Waterson is older, she is still skilled and has proved that she has skills throughout her UFC career. So yeah, I do think Luana gets this fight done, but there are a few things that just scare me, and I'd kind of stay away from it. I mean, you never know in women's MMA. We see underdogs like this cash all the time.
Yeah, that is the scary part. It's women's MMA. And, the favorites went 2-0 last week, so one of them might come through here. We got a couple more to talk about, though, later in the show. But we're going to the heavyweights. Beast Boy Barnett and Chase Sherman, minus 200 for Chase Sherman, plus 200 for Beast Boy. Over under 2.5 rounds, plus 119 for the over, minus 119 for the under. Are the big boys going to get a finish? This is quite the fight, I got to say. For Beast Boy, I mean, he missed the heavyweight limit in his last fight against Jay Collier. Weighed in at 267.5. He's only 5 feet 9 inches tall. Honestly, just kind of a freak show fighter. Like, I mean, he's athletic for a 5'9", 267 pounder. But that's what he is. He's got the spinning wheel kick against John Vellante, and then just a wild fight against Jake Collier, where he was almost finished and then came back and finished him in the second round. He's 2-2 in the UFC. And that's just crazy. I mean, he's 500 in the UFC. And then you look at Chase Sherman. Chase Sherman's 4-10 in the UFC. And he's had a couple stints, 3 technically, in the UFC. He left the UFC in 2018 after losing to Augusto Sakai. Does a couple fights with Island Fights, goes to BKFC, and then comes back into the UFC against Ike Villanueva in 2020. And then they cut him against the loss to Jake Collier, and then they bring him back because they need someone to fight Alexander Romanov. And he's a plus 1,000 underdog in that one against Alexander Romanov. I don't know. I mean, we were kind of talking a little bit about it earlier. He's a durable fighter. He doesn't have like just crazy, not like a crazy power puncher for a heavyweight. He's more of a volume guy. I mean, he lands 6.30 strikes per minute. Gets hit a lot, though. Chris Barnett, like I said, he's kind of a freak show fighter. In this one, this is the definition of dog or pass to me. Like, there's no chance ever in my life am I taking Chase Sherman minus 200. I've lost way too much money betting Chase Sherman in spots that just looked too good to pass up, and he's never came through. So I'm not taking him. I don't know, maybe Chris Barnett can pull some miracle off again with some spinning kick. But yeah, it's dog or pass to me. Just greasy heavyweights, completely greasy heavyweights. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Chase Sherman has not lost by knockout since 2018, and that was to Augusto Sakai. And the one thing that scares me about taking the dog here is that he's 5'9" at 265 pounds. And I know the athleticism, like, believe it or not, the dude is athletic as hell. I mean, the wheel kick, incredible. And then he finishes Collier and then does the front flip. Or maybe it was maybe he did the front flip against somebody else. But anyways, the dude's athletic for his size. You would never guess it. But you're fighting a guy in Chase Sherman who's 6'4" and is a good boxer. When Chase Sherman doesn't have to worry about the takedowns and he can get his hands going, like, he's not the worst fighter. At least he's technical with it. And he's not, a huge heavyweight where he gasses out because, he has no endurance and he's just, banking on the knockout. So it makes it interesting for sure. I think Barnett is an exciting fighter. I don't know if he's UFC caliber. I think if he were to get 3-4 wins in a row, he's going to run into somebody who's a lot taller than him, and it's going to give him a ton of trouble. I mean, being 5'9" at the heavyweight division just shouldn't work. It's worked a little bit for him. 500%. He's 500%, or not 500%. He's got a 500 win average on him, but I mean, the guys he's fighting aren't anybody to brag about at all. And then Chase Sherman, being 4-10, I just don't think this is a fight you can really bet on. Another fight you can't really bet on and be confident in. Chase Sherman should win, and I think maybe he gets it done by decision, just outpoints him because he does have a 5-inch, height advantage, and he's got the reach and stuff. But you just never know with Barnett, man. He might land that wheel kick. I feel like this fight is Chase Sherman boxing and fighting from the outside, and Chris Barnett whiffing on a bunch of big shots the whole fight, and it ends up being kind of a somewhat boring decision fight. I really do. I think Chase Sherman's the pick, but it's just greasy.
I dare you to put money on Chase Sherman.
Dude, there's no way at that money line, though. There's no way. Like, there's no value on him there. I think you got to play a prop in this one.
Yeah, agreed. Middleweight bout here, a good one. Gerald Meerschaert, Joseph Pyfer, -168 for Pyfer, +168 for Gerald Meerschaert. Over under 1.5 rounds. The only 1.5 over under we got on the card. So this one we're thinking is going to be violence. +124 for the over, -124 for the under. You taking the dog, Gerald Meerschaert. He's come through as a dog before. You taking him here?
No, sir. Joe Pyfer's different, man. He's an up and coming star in the UFC, I think. He does have he averages takedowns, and he's got a decent takedown average, but I just don't think he's going to have to worry about getting taken down by Gerald Meerschaert here. Meerschaert's great on the ground. I mean, submission game is outstanding. He's got a million submissions on his record, but against a guy like Joe Pyfer, who's strong, younger, athletic, it's going to be a task to get that guy to the ground. And if you can't, Joe Pyfer has some hands on him. He's obviously powerful. We've seen him, destroy guys. I think Joe Pyfer runs straight across the cage, gets in his face, and just, finds that first round knockout. If I'm being honest, I really do. If the fight goes on, it gets a tad more interesting. I think Pyfer, through the duration of 3 rounds, is probably just going to do what he wants with Meerschaert and have his way with him. I like Meerschaert. I think he's fun when the fight hits the ground. He's fun to watch, and he had a great performance against Bruno Silva. To be able to stay in there, not get knocked out, and eventually find the submission was impressive. But I mean, Khamzat Chimaev ran straight across the cage and knocked him out with one right hook. I can see a similar thing happening here with Body Bags Joe Pyfer. So that's going to be my pick. I'm going to leave it pretty cut and dry. I think I'm going to have to play that first round KO prop too.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right on that one. I think Pyfer is he's going to be a star. I think he's got a lot of potential in the UFC. He's only 26, and he's coming off the win against Alan Amedovski, which was back in September. First round knockout there. And then he was the only guy in his week of Contender Series to get a contract. He was the main event against Ozzy Diaz, and he got a knockout in the second round, which was a really nice knockout. So, he's got power. He's got a lot of power. He's got some pretty solid wrestling and ground game as well. But if he wants to win this fight, path of least resistance is probably going to be on the feet. Jared Meerschaert showed a lot of good stuff on the feet against Bruno Silva in his last fight when he was a pretty big underdog, plus 240. And ultimately, how he got that guillotine was he cracked him. And Bruno Silva just left his neck out because he was dazed, grabbed that guillotine, cinched it up. And that's what Jared Meerschaert does. I mean, he gets the submission wins. He's got, 12, 22, 26, 27 officially on his record, 27 submission wins. That is pretty nuts.
Yep.
So I think Joseph Pyfer is going to be cognizant of that because everybody should be. And I think Pyfer isn't going to want to test anything on the ground. I think he's just knows he's got the advantage on the feet. He shows a lot of good combinations when he's on the feet. If you look at the knockout against Amedovski, like Amedovski is nothing to write home about. Like Pyfer should have won that fight 100%. He was a heavy favorite, but you look at the combo he used to set up that knockout right cross. It was pretty nice, and I think he's gonna be able to do that against Gerald Meerschaert, who can get cracked on the feet as well. He's been knocked out 3 times. So I'll take Joseph Pyfer. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got for that one. Cynthia Calvillo and Lupita Godinez, minus 240 for Godinez, plus 240 for Cynthia Calvillo. Over under 2.5 rounds, minus 289 for the over, plus 289 for the under. Strawweight bout here. Cynthia Calvillo coming down from flyweight. She was a strawweight before. She made the switch up back in 2020. She fought Jessica I, won that fight, so she won her debut at 125. And then she loses 4 straight, and now she's going back down to 115. So she had a lot of success at 115 before. She had a draw against Marina Rodriguez in 2019. We all know how good Marina Rodriguez is. And her only loss before that was to Carla Esparza, which was actually a pretty close fight. So I'm not ready to write off Cynthia Calvillo. I know she's 35 years old, but this is women's MMA. And we have seen in women's MMA that anything could happen. And I'm looking at this one, and I'm seeing like maybe it's my bias because I had a minus ticket or a chalk ticket on Lupita Godinez in her last fight against Angela Hill, and she lost to Angela Hill. She was a minus 360 favorite against Angela Hill, and she lost a decision there. And then you look back in 2021, she was a minus 225 favorite against Luana Carolina, and she lost. And then you look back in 2021, in April of 2021, she's a minus 285 favorite against Jessica Penne, and she lost. So she has a history of losing fights where she's a pretty heavy favorite. And I can't do it. I just can't do it. I'm scarred against for the Angela Hill fight. Lupita Godinez, she can look really good at one point, and then she can look really bad at another point. And in this one, I think Calvillo kind of needs a win. Like she really needs a win. There's not a lot to get behind in her last performances. She didn't look bad against Nina Nunes back in August of 2022. She lost a split decision. She could have won that fight. But she's going down to 115. I think she's going to be a little bit bigger. Lupita Godinez, best strength is the takedowns. I don't know why she didn't use it against Angela Hill, but that's her best strength. Like she's a strong girl, and she can get those takedowns. But dude, like something's telling me Cynthia Calvillo is going to come through as the underdog in this spot because she needs a win. She has a lot of experience at 115, a lot of successful experience at 115. she's probably going to come in here really wanting to get a win and really kind of feeling like she needs a win. I think it's dog or pass. Like I think that's what it boils down to. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'm on the same side as you. I think Lupi Godinez has beat some decent fighters, so it's kind of confusing. She's beaten Loma Luke Boonmi, Ariana Carnelosi, and then Silvana Gomez Suarez. But then she loses to Angela Hill, where she doesn't use the wrestling and the grappling like her one path to victory. It makes you wonder if the fight IQ is completely there. And then she loses to Luana Carolina, who we've seen lose, on the last card or the card before that. So fighting a vet like Cynthia Calvillo, and Calvillo being this big of an underdog, it gets interesting because I think she is probably the underdog because of her record here, being 1-5 in her last 6, but she's losing to Andrea Lee, who we saw, probably beat Macy Barber last weekend, if I'm being honest, Jessica Andrade, Caitlin Chukagian, and Madrina Rodriguez. So she's not fighting any slouches by any means. She's actually going to be the bigger fighter here, too. She's going to have a 2-inch height advantage, a 3-inch reach advantage. And I think she can hang with Godinez in the wrestling department if the fight goes there. And on the feet, I think she's going to be a little overwhelming for Godinez at times, too. So I think it's a perfect. If you want to lay something on the dog here, I would not mind it at all, especially with Lupi, who sometimes you just don't know what you're going to get out of her.
Yeah, just extremely inconsistent.
Yeah,
and as a big favorite, like I just can't do it. Can't do it. Trey Ogden, Ignacio Bahamondes. There's no lines out for this one because Trey Ogden is stepping in to replace. Who is he replacing?
It would have been
Nicholas Mata. Yeah, Nicholas Mata withdrew. So Trey Ogden, who was originally supposed to fight in UFC San Antonio, which was less than 7 days ago, his opponent pulled out, so he's wants to fight. And he's going to get a fight here on a pay-per-view prelim against Ignacio Bahamondes, which I think is kind of a step up in competition for him. So, I mean, he was an underdog against Manuel Torres. He's probably going to be an underdog in this fight as well. But, man, I read Trey Ogden's, story on what he had to go through to make weight for UFC San Antonio, which was crazy because if you have a moment, go to his Instagram and read the post. But I'll summarize basically. He's needed to cut weight. He wanted to get he had the hot tub at the Airbnb or whatever. Hot tub wasn't working. He went to a LA Fitness. That wasn't working. And then ultimately he had to go to he had to do some kind of sauna cut. He had to go through some crazy stuff to make weight. He made weight. And then his opponent pulled out after he made weight. So it's it's just a shitty thing to go through and then not be able to go out and fight. So I think that's part of the reason why he's taking this fight here just a couple weeks later. So he's an underdog there. He felt very disrespected that he was an underdog against Manuel Torres. He's probably going to be an underdog against Bahamondes. He's kind of fighting a guy we kind of talked about earlier off the show. And Daniel Zellhuber, who he beat in his last fight, is very similar to Ignacio Bahamondes. Taller guys who have good kicks, good striking in general, and he beat him by unanimous decision his last time out. I think Bahamondes is a lot better than Daniel Zellhuber at this point, but maybe Trey Ogden can expose something because you look at Bahamondes' wins, they're not great. Zhang Ru Zhang or whatever. He's somewhat of a prospect out of China. He hasn't really done much. He's a younger guy. He's 1-2 in the UFC. Roosevelt Roberts, who got cut from the UFC, wheel kicked him with 5 seconds left, and then a loss to John Makdessi by a split decision, who is a much smaller guy as well. Bahamondes, solid on the feet, and he's 8.33 strikes landed per minute. So he's going to throw out a lot of volume at you. He's got a lot of different tools in his arsenal on the feet. He can snatch something up with those long limbs. But Trey Ogden, I'm interested to see this line because I'm going to say Bahamondes is probably going to be minus 250, minus 300, probably somewhere around there. It's also another thing, how is that body going to do cutting weight twice in 2 weeks? Even after having a tough cut, having to go through a sauna, It's interesting. It's at a catch weight, which is 160, so just 5 pounds more than the 155 normal weight for him. We'll see how it goes, but this is a greasy fight, and I can't really give too much of a pick, like if I haven't seen the lines or like I just can't really give too much to you. I think Bahamondes should win. He'll probably be a bigger favorite. So I'm not really saying anything crazy there, but Trey Ogden is always a live dog. So what do you think?
No, I'm the same way. And Trey Ogden against Zellhuber did so good of circling out of danger and just kind of, making Zellhuber miss and then hitting him with shots that, weren't like devastating or anything. But then he'd, in the grappling department, he'd get in close, win some rounds with control up against the fence. But he was a lot harder to hit in that fight than I thought he was going to be. And he kept Zellhuber guessing all the time with that front kick and, basically fought the perfect fight to beat another striker when you're a grappler. Against Bahamondes, the one knock I have on Bahamondes is that he gets hit. I mean, if you watch that Roosevelt Roberts fight, I mean, his face was pretty torn up, like the nose from the jab and all that. So I wish Trey Ogden had just like a sliver more of some striking or some good technical boxing, because mix that in with the grappling. I think that's the recipe to upset Ignacio Bahamondes here. But I mean, Bahamondes is tough and he does hit pretty hard, and he stays within himself really well too. Like you don't see him going, having these big wild exchanges. Like he keeps everything pretty tight, and you can tell he's not throwing like 100% on his shots. Like he keeps everything like 85, 90% accurate, and finds the chin. But man, if Ogden can just keep circling out and land a takedown or two here, he makes it really interesting because he does have a lot of submissions and is good on the ground and in the grappling department. And Bahamondes is still, pretty green at this too. I mean, he's beaten Roosevelt Roberts, who you touched on, that's not even in the UFC, and then Rong Zhu, who, I mean, for the average viewer, is probably not going to know him or seen any of his fights. So yeah, man, it makes it super interesting. I don't think I've seen enough out of Ignacio Bahamondes to hammer him here, and especially if the line's going to be pretty wide, which I'm guessing it's going to be. And Trey Ogden's just that sneaky guy that if you don't go out there and, put hands to face and really touch him up, he's going to find a way to kind of sneak rounds from you just by touching you with that front kick or making you miss and then getting in on a double leg or holding you up against the cage and doing some good work in the clinch. So yeah, man, I think this fight could look similar to the Daniel Zellhuber fight. And if Trey Ogden loses, I don't think it's by much. I don't think he gets knocked out. I don't think he's ever been knocked out.
Oh.
So, I mean, he's tough. He's a good fighter. The one thing is that he was coached by James Krause, and James Krause had that game plan perfect against Zellhuber. And it's going to be a brand new coach for this fight. So you never know how that affects a fighter mentally and stuff. But yeah, man, I'll be interested to see what the line is. If Ogden's a really big underdog, I think I'm forced to sprinkle something on him.
Yeah, we didn't even touch on like any kind of grappling game because he's got a lot of submissions under his record. Obviously, you probably don't want to stand and strike with a guy that's much longer than you. So I think it could be a path to victory that he takes him down and does some work there because Bahamondes has been subbed twice as well. So can't use a lot of that length when you're on your back and getting smothered. Steve Garcia against Shailen Nuerdanbieke. Featherweight bout. Plus 190 for the Steve the Mean Machine Garcia. Minus 190 for Shailen Nuerdanbieke. Over under 2.5 rounds. Plus 138 for the over. Minus 138 for the under. Watch out for the line movement on this one. It's going to be the 50th fight for Shailen Nuerdanbieke. I say that jokingly because, of course, he was not involved, but he was in the fight that is currently still under investigation. So keep an eye on that one. Steve Garcia, an insanely dominant win in his last time out against Chase Hooper, who just really made him look like he didn't belong anywhere near an octagon in that fight. That was his first fight at 145. Steve Garcia, that was his first fight at 145 and knocked him out in 30 or 92 seconds. So, and knocked him down 3 times, like just completely obliterated him. Made Chase Hooper probably have to go back to the drawing board and work on a lot of stuff. But on the feet, man, like Steve He's got great hands. He's got really good hands. That left hand, he was just touching and Chase Hooper up. The only knock on him is like he can get cracked a couple times too. He got cracked against Meerschaert at UFC 275, and he lost a decision against Luis Pena, who pretty much just controlled him for a good amount of time. Those are his 2 losses in the UFC. Nuerdanbieke, honestly, like I'm not like super impressed by him. That's why I'm just trying to get myself to see this line, and I just don't see it. Like maybe it's the experience, but like, is it really experience? Because he has 4 UFC fights, and his wins are Derek Minner, which was like a fluke fight. It really wasn't a fight. TJ Brown and Sean Soriano. Those are his wins in the UFC. And then he's got a bunch of fights that just who really knows like what they really are. It's gonna be his 50th career pro fight, but I don't put too much stock into that. I like Steve Garcia as a dog here. I think if it's on the feet, he can put a beating on Shiloh Nuerdanbieke. I mean, he's an aggressive dude, and I like a guy that's going to be aggressive, especially if you're putting dog money on him. He's going to go for the finish. He's going to be aggressive on the feet. He's going to push a pace. He's got 100% takedown defense as well, and that's probably the path that Nuerdanbieke is going to want to go to in this one. So I don't see it going too well for him if they're just standing. He's got a 6-inch reach advantage. Steve Garcia does. And as a dog, I'm going to have to play it sometime. I mean, in some sort of fashion, I'm going to have to play Steve Garcia as a dog. What do you think?
No, I'm with you because the one knock I have on Nuerdanbieke is that, he's so powerful. Like you can see it. Like he's stocky, he's strong. And when he does crack, I mean, he can strike pretty well, but he's so hesitant on the feet. I mean, he only lands just over 2 significant strikes per minute. And he absorbs nearly 3. So he's got a negative striking differential. I mean, he just looks a little like stuck in the mud almost at times when he's striking with guys. Like he's not fully confident in his skill set on the feet, but he does, excel when he gets takedowns and can get fights to the ground. He doesn't really, have a bunch of sub attempts. I don't know if he has any submission attempts in the UFC, but he does average nearly 3 takedowns a fight, and he just uses that wrestling and strength to get guys down. But I mean, Steve Garcia is a strong dude who's going to be, I mean, you'll see it in the octagon. He's going to be quite a bit, bigger than Shiloh Nuerdanbieke here. And on the feet, I think Garcia could just get off on him with volume in general. I think, if this thing does stay up against the cage in the clinch, it's going to be Garcia landing some good shots and just kind of overwhelming Nuerdanbieke here. And Nuerdanbieke just trying to get the takedowns. And like you said, Steve Garcia's got 100% takedown defense, and he averages a couple himself as well. So he's no slouch in that department at all. I'm just Steve Garcia too on the feet. He averages 2.52 significant strikes absorbed, which is pretty low for a guy who lands over 5. So that's good numbers that should make you a little confident too, being this big of a dog. I actually like that he's southpaw in this, so it's not like Nuerdanbieke's gonna be out there chewing up that front leg by any means too, which is what would scare me in this fight. So yeah, man, I think Garcia's got a big chance to cash here as a live dog. I like him a lot actually, and Nuerdanbieke too. He has a lot of knockouts and just not at this level, not at the UFC level. And you never know who he was fighting back in the day where he racked up these 39 wins.
Yeah, looking back on that Chase Hooper line, I'll always look at that line and just laugh. Like, yeah, it's just crazy. I think he was one of the bigger favorites on that card and just looked completely terrible.
Yep.
Steve Garcia. Strawweight bout between Sam Hughes and I think it's Jacqueline Amorim. Minus 225 for Jacqueline, plus 225 for Sam Hughes. Over under 2.5 rounds, minus 133 for the over, plus 133 for the under. The undefeated Jacqueline Amorim, and she's got all first round finishes. And we talked a little bit before the show. I think you're I don't know, do you like Sam Hughes, or are you just kind of women's MMA in it and saying it's a debuting fighter? I like the women's MMA dogs recently. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, Yeah, it's a little of both here because, I mean, all first round finishes basically makes me really nervous for a girl coming into the UFC fighting, somewhat of a UFC vet in Sam Hughes. Because if you can't get her out of there in the first round, then what happens? Like, we have no idea what she looks like in round 2 or 3. And Sam Hughes is skilled enough and fought girls that I think are better than Jacqueline here. And Jacqueline is obviously going to want to get this thing down to the ground. She's had success in her fights at the lower level promotions, but if you watch her, man, she's not she shoots her takedowns a little weird. Like, they're not really explosive. She's more just like stronger than her opponents and can drag you down. And Sam Hughes gets taken down, but if she can just survive that first round, man, I think Sam Hughes comes on strong, pieces her up on the feet. If Jacqueline can't get the takedowns, I think from the jump, I mean, if Sam Hughes stuffs that first takedown, I think you see a huge confidence dip in Jacqueline here, and then Sam Hughes is going to have a pretty good shot to win as a live dog. I just can't do it anymore. I can't put my money on these UFC debuting women, especially ones that have never been past the first round. Because at the end of the day, she's fought in LFA and was the LFA champ, but this is a different level, and it always will be, in my opinion. Get to the UFC, it's a pay-per-view card. It just doesn't. It's not a recipe for me to hammer a favorite here or put her in a parlay. So watch out for Sam Hughes, especially if this fight goes past the first round and Sam Hughes loses that first round. I would definitely hammer Sam Hughes as a live dog on the live odds.
Yeah, an LFA champ for a men's is a lot different than an LFA champ in women's. Like, an LFA champ for a man coming into the UFC could probably do some pretty good stuff, and that guy is going to be pretty good. He can handle with a lot of the fighters, at least entry level fighters. And a champ for the LFA for women's isn't the same. Like, she could go in there and look not like a fish out of water, but just nothing like she's finishing everybody in the first round. Like, she's not going to come into the UFC and do that unless she's just some crazy prospect. I watch her. There's not a lot of film to watch on her because she just finishes people in the first round.
Right.
But like you said, what do we know after the first round? She trains at an American Top Team, so a good team. But it's probably going to be like a live betting spot. If you like Sam Hughes, I don't think if you like Sam Hughes, I would just wait. Just wait until after the first round, because Jacqueline's probably going to come out with something hot. And she has some solid power on the feet too. I mean, the knockout she had in LFA was in 10 seconds. It was just like one right hand and put her out. And then she's got the submission game as well. But Sam Hughes, a big part of her game is mixing in the wrestling. So if she wants to win this fight, is she going to outstrike her for, 15 minutes or at least 10 minutes or something like that? I don't know. It's kind of a lot to ask. Just a weird one here. I would maybe look at Amorim inside the distance or something, because if this fight does make it to round 2, we don't know what she looks like. I'm going to guess she probably looks fine. But at the same time, it's when you just murk people in the first round of your entire pro career and then you don't murk somebody in your debut, maybe that starts to get to your head and something like that. But it's women's MMA, and a debuting fighter at minus 200 plus is tough. That's just tough. It doesn't matter who you're facing, Yeah. So I agree with you.
It's just that confidence thing too. Making your debut on the first fight of UFC 287, under the bright lights, the biggest stage in all of combat sports, and then mix that in with the pressure that everybody knows I finished all of my fights in the first round. I got to go out and do it here too. And then Sam Hughes stuffs a takedown, and then you think, oh shit, what I get myself into type of thing. I just feel like we've seen that before. I think we saw it with Juliana Miller not long ago, making her UFC debut, official UFC debut. She couldn't get that takedown or get her hands on Hardy, and it was downhill fast. So you just never know, man. And if it goes to the judges' scorecards, I feel like in women's MMA, you want to be holding that dog ticket.
Oh yeah, that is for sure. Sam Page could pull off the underdog ticket there. So that's it for UFC 287. Those are all the fights And like I said, if you want to get in on the picks, in on the bets, link will be down in the description below if you want the premium, or you can wait until the night before or the morning of to get the plays just for the card of UFC 287. If you're watching here on YouTube, drop a subscription to support the channel. Drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and drop a comment down below if you got any plays that you're looking at this week, or I guess this week in UFC 287. At the Double Leg on all the social medias, you can find us there. We'll be putting out content on Instagram and TikTok. At HeyJive Picks on the social medias for me. Where can they find you?
TikTok, The Parlay, Instagram and Twitter, The Parlay MMA, Instagram, The Parlay _media, and Twitter and YouTube, The Parlay MMA.
All right. Well, next time we see you, we'll have some answers on what's going on in the middleweight division. Can Izzy finally get that coveted win against Alex Pereira, or can Pereira move to 0-4 or 4-0 against Israel Adesanya? So excited to see that. I'll be in attendance again, making the trip down there. So looking forward to that. And I'll be showing stuff on my trip as well on my Instagram. So make sure to catch that. Till then, the Double Leg signing out.